Kalimera. Bonjour. Good morning.
Dobar dan.
Pozdravljeni.
Good morning.
Bonjour.
How are you?
Gefinto.
Good morning, bonjour, guten tag, buenos dias, and goedemorgen.
Hello everyone, my name is Marlena and I'm representing Lithuania.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bibiana and this is Katrina.
Pięknie wam zagromy i coś zaśpiewamy. Pięknie wam zagromy i coś zaśpiewamy. Welcome. We are the students of Agnes Bernauer Secondary School, and it's in Augsburg, in the region of Bavaria. Our school is having a particular class, and refugees are also having the possibility to visit this school. In this school, there's a lot of students from different countries. And these countries are Syria, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iran, Nigeria, Brazil, Romania, and Russia. Our city, Augsburg, symbol is pine tree. This symbol is considered the nucleus of today's life. And at the end, we would like to thank you for paying your great attention.
As you all know, our country recently voted for Brexit. However, it's important to stress that in our school, the vast majority of us wanted to remain members of the European Union. We hope that we will learn a lot about the European Parliament today. Thank you.
Който веднъж те погледне, той вечно жале, че не може под твоите сенки да изтле. Dankeschön.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you for that very friendly round of applause. I'm a German member of the European Parliament. I come from Stuttgart. So this is not my time, but your time. I can see a number of sort of hands shooting up in the air already, so I'm going to keep it brief. I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, Herr Wieland.
Good morning, Mr. Wieland. I'm from Germany, and I'm here with a group of fellow pupils from my school. Almost 50% of the pupils in my school are refugees. We're being schooled in our school in Augsburg, and we're all doing very well. I would like to ask you why it's so difficult for Europe to welcome refugees, and why we don't have a system for sharing the refugees fairly between all 28 countries. Why isn't this possible?
Das ist sehr schwierig. Und es gibt auch Staaten, die sagen,
some states say that once things have calmed down, we can talk about voluntarily accepting refugees, but they refuse to have binding decisions. And some countries are proud to say that. So let's be blunt about this. In some countries, the head of government wouldn't be re-elected if he accepted 30,000 refugees. And you should never expect others to do more than you do yourself. And as a politician, I recognise that the willingness of heads of government to make proposals which won't get them re-elected is limited. I don't think that we can force people to do anything. I don't think we can punish them. Lots of people in Germany are saying that we should be punishing those countries that don't want to take refugees in. I don't think that's the right way forward. Punishment is something which we shouldn't be using in Europe. What we can say is that under this enormous pressure, more money has to be paid into the European budget, and those countries which do take on the burden of more refugees should be refunded for that burden. It's perhaps ultimately the mechanism is the same as taking money away from other countries, but it's not a punishment. We have to try to work with goodwill. Obviously, it's very difficult if one government leader says, I'm not going to accept any Muslims. Oh, this with stupid reasons such as we haven't got any mosques where they can pray. There's no point in punishing them, but it's going to take quite some time to find a solution. And I think we have to talk openly. Once again, those who are entitled to asylum, genuine refugees, should be given a place. We have to be able to talk openly about this. And there's also the possibility of those people being expected to settle in countries which they wouldn't necessarily choose themselves. If Europe is to organise itself properly and to provide acceptable accommodation everywhere, we have to provide people from protection from political prosecution, violence and war. And I don't think we'll be allowed to people to pick and choose where they go. In the same way as in Germany, people don't have a free choice. You can't say, I don't want to be in Stuttgart, I want to be in Erfurt. No, that simply won't work. And that's something else we're going to have an honest and difficult discussion about.
Should more laws be made abroad in Europe than on a national level?
Wie viel Europa brauche ich? Wie viel
The question is, how much Europe do we need? How much European legislation do we need? And obviously, that depends on what the type of decision you're talking about. If we take an example such as Latvia, for example, Lithuania, they say that refugees don't want to come to our countries, we don't have to take refugees in. However, when it comes to defence, for example, the Baltic states feel Russia breathing down their neck, so they want us to spend a lot of money on defence. So obviously, priorities differ from one country to another. This is why we have the question, do we need European legislation in certain areas? And that's something we have to fight for again and again. I believe that in some areas we will in the future need more Europe, not less. The current crisis, debt crisis, foreign affairs or foreign crisis, refugee crisis, those are primarily crises affecting nations, states, rather than Europe.
I want to ask, in your opinion, what is the future of Europe?
A former German chancellor once said that vision should be sent to the doctor. Obviously, we need vision. I had a group of young people from my own constituency who've gone to lunch now, I think, and we talked about this beforehand. I have a dream of Europe. My dream is that as a German, one day it won't be necessary for Germany to have a foreign minister. Baden-Württemberg, my own region, for example, it used to be two kingdoms, and I think it's quite normal that Baden-Württemberg has no foreign minister and everybody agrees. That's where I think Europe should be going. Obviously, Europe and its future is sometimes difficult to talk about, both with young people and even more so with older people. That's why I would suggest talk to older people about Europe, talk to them what they think. Of course it's not simple, but Europe has always gone through crises in the past. Europe has always made more progress at difficult times than where everything was fine and rosy. As they say in Local Heroes, we're the best. So at difficult times, people realise they have to work together to find solutions. What's new is that Europe suddenly faces a whole series of crises, and that's difficult. But, as they say, not all painters who use dark colours are necessarily depressed. I'm not depressed. You're the first generation, I think, who can justifiably grow up with hope that this century can start in the way the last century ended, rather than this century starting in the way the last century started. We always have to remember that we're very privileged. We have privileges which previous generations didn't have. This is your continent, it's your future, but you have to take very good care of it. Thank you.
The first idea is raising awareness, especially among youngsters, by funding the poorer countries for books and different materials through which they can present the subject. The second idea is, with almost an unanimous vote, is promoting the use of public transport by making it cheaper, especially for younger and older people. We also agreed that the European Union should invest more in renewable energy. It is clear that oil and coal are outdated, and we have to move past them. Our fourth decision is the investment in nuclear power research in order to make it safer. The subject is quite controversial, but we've come to the conclusion that nuclear energy is a necessity for our generation despite its dangers. Last but not least is the reduction of sanctions when a given company breaks a law concerning the environment. Instead punishing them, we're going to help them overcome the difficulties instead of breaking the law.
About the public transport, how can we just make it cheaper? Who should pay for it, government or with the help of taxes, or how? Thank you.
We should convince the governments of the richer countries to spend more money and to make it easier. As you said, they can pay. And for poorer countries, the European Union can perhaps share its own resources.
If there is a scenario where the majority of people is at risk, some human rights can be taken away temporarily for the safety. In case of that a European country doesn't follow the rules of human rights, we suggest the following. At first, we would give them a warning. If the warning wouldn't work and they would still keep going, economic measurements would be taken. If, because of any reason, economic sanctions aren't an option, their power in the parliament will be reduced. And finally, freedom of expression is allowed to be taken away if the safety of the majority is at risk.
I want to ask you about the freedom of speech. I think that this is a fundamental right that should not be taken away, because that's the way for people to show what's really happening inside the country. What do you think?
Well, in some scenarios, freedom of speech or freedom of expression could turn into hate speech, or starting a crime or anger. For example, in a situation where somebody keeps on telling that a certain group of people is bad and you should kill them, that could be considered freedom of expression. But it also could be considered starting a war or an argument or a fight, and that could be a criminal offense. So I think in that situation, that person shouldn't be allowed to make those comments.
Our first measure is about education. Education is very important in order to create more informed persons to develop their country. So, to improve and develop undeveloped and developing countries, we'll need to bet in education. We propose the creation of schools and universities and send professors to areas with the more problems. Because give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. Teach him to fish and he will eat for the rest of his life. So, to create richness, we'll have to bet in a good education, and they will be well prepared for life. If we just give them money, they will use it and they'll not use it in order to create more richness. And thanks to corruption, many of that money will end in the pocket of a rich man and not to the people who need it. That leads to our second measure, the creation of a European committee to be sure that the money that is sent to the people who need it's being well used. This committee will check if the money is being well used, it's being well used. This will allow to use more efficiently and the money will be used to more increase anything, increase the things that it can be used. Our third measure, it's about fair trade. The intermediates like supermarkets are getting too much money. So promoting the fair trade will help the agriculture buying directly and selling it at a fair price.
The stimulation of member states to stay in the European Union. Now you're all aware of the unprecedented phenomenon of a member country leaving the European Union, and that is the United Kingdom, also known as Brexit. There are internal struggles in a lot of countries in Europe which reside within the borders of one country. An example for that would be the province Catalonia in Spain. The people there desire independence. They believe that they are another nation. And with the eventual separation of this country, there is the question of do we actually stay in the European Union or do we leave? Do we take our own course in life? The formation of stronger bonds within the European Union is a priority for the whole institution. An incentive not to leave the EU is not very easy to give, but that would be one of the serious tasks that the European Union faces in the future. The majority of our group agrees that the European nations should be able to freely leave the European Union as a result of a people's decision. That is in accordance with the principles of the European Union, and especially with the one of freedom of speech. The second aspect would be the unity of Europeans. Different cultures have their unique customs. Europe is one whole, but the different countries represent themselves in different competitions and on the international stage as sovereign states. We have reached the conclusion that working together is the way to go, and the formation of one huge country that would cover the whole continent, as in the case with the United States of America, would be the wrong solution, as by doing that, the countries from the European Union would lose their uniqueness. I would like to mention at the end of my presentation that the vision for the future of the European Union is by no stretch of the imagination a pessimistic one. We truly believe that by working together and staying united, we would be able to overcome any difficulties and to build a pillar of safety and freedom. Thank you.
My name is Rainer Wieland. I'm from Afghanistan, but since 3 years I live in Germany. And first of all, I would like to thank Europe Union and Europe Parliament to give us this opportunity to be here and share our opinions with you. And I'm a member of Migration and Integration Group, and all of you know that it's a very complicated topic. We all sit together as a group and discuss it, and we try to find solutions or ideas to get through it.
We agreed that the migrants who come into Europe should be educated and that children should be a priority. We would allocate migrants to certain jobs for the community, allowing a vetting process. This was something that we had to actually scrutinize and finally vote for, so that doctors, for example, coming from Syria, weren't allocated the job of working in a park, sweeping up leaves, making sure that that doctor through a government job application would find a job in the healthcare section. After all, that is what he's trained for, and we need doctors. Doctors will the jobs places for doctors will never run out because everyday humans are in need of healthcare. Finally, one of our hot topics, I would say, quite important, I think, for anyone who is considering allowing migrants into the country, is that in the case of prosecution of the migrants in the event of a law breaking, in the context of society. And one of the examples that we had was respect for women. And we're trying not to generalize here because it was quite a problem in the debate, naming and generalizing certain countries or people. People who come as migrants who grew up in a society where respect for women isn't at the same standard as the respect for women in Europe that we try to imply here, wouldn't have any kind of privileges when being prosecuted for it, if it was something that they could be prosecuted for. We all agreed that if you come to Europe, you have to follow the laws and values that we follow in our society, and that has been set by the government or by the European Union, depending on what law it is. And the excuse of it wasn't in my upbringing to do such a thing in this way, or I wasn't used to it, we don't do it back home. We agreed that that excuse wouldn't be valid.
So what more can be done in order to solve this issue? Firstly, we could like to point out that nowadays a lot of professions are at the edge of extinction due to the rapid technological and development. Consequently, we should focus on educating the Europeans on the jobs of the future, such as nanotechnology or biochemists. Secondly, the European Parliament could organize job fairs where young Europeans could get informed about various professions, show their interest for a recommended position, and promote themselves for possible jobs, as employers would be taking part in the fairs as well. Another solution would be solving the problem through career counseling. Counselors can put a person's strengths, weaknesses, and qualifications and skills in a large perspective, while also considering their desired salary, personal hobbies, or educational possibilities. Furthermore, career counselors not only possess information and resources about up-to-date labor market, but also have knowledge about how to teach enjoyability skills, such as networking and interviewing. Also, there is definitely room for employment of the visibility and accessibility to the European Job Mobility Portal, which helps young people to access information and actively seek for jobs across Europe. Additionally, further progress towards the mutual recognition of qualification and skills in the European Union will contribute to the promotion of job mobility among young people. Finally, to reduce the cost of courses, one solution is to break degree or vocational programs into individual modules that focus on building a particular set of skills, while still counting toward a degree or formal qualification. Each of these modules would be short and self-contained, enable young people to combine and sequence them in the order that makes the most sense for their career aspiration. This model also enables young people to take a break in their studies to work, and then picking up where they left off.
More than 4 million young people are today unemployed. Do you think that your solution would work for such a big number of unemployed youngsters?
I want to give a personal example. In my home city, Burgas, there's a nutrition school, school for future cooks, and there was held a job fair where different restaurant owners came and they observed how the students prepared food in front of them. Then they've tasted the food and considered who should they hire. And a lot of students, around 60%, were hired after they finished their high school education. They were proposed a job, they have been proposed a job, and they would start at the restaurant. Thanks.